All right, Michelle, you're talking about failure right now.
Yeah. So I've been really doing this inquiry into failure and the unsaid truths of failure. I came up with a few things and I'm just going to run them by you. I have failure is a culmination of many successes that didn't end the way you'd hoped it would. Failure is always a chance for a new beginning. Failure is an acknowledgement that some dreams need to end so new ones can be formed.
That is
Failure teaches you exactly how far you can go in your present circumstances. Being good at failure means moving forward from the actual realization more quickly and shortening the wallowing phase. Failure is a benchmark we need in life. Failure is not always losing, and failure can create a light that shows your next step. Failure is one of those experiences that never really ends, but it does evolve. When I fail, there is an immediate sense of loss. Grief ensues. My body feels tired, possibly depressed, sad, disappointed. This phase can last as long as needed. Often it goes on way too long in order to motivate me into another phase. The motivation is the very unpleasant experience of the actual failure. Motivation comes when you have the very unpleasant experience, when you fully feel the failure. Then motivation comes. So I'm looking into what is the substance of failure. What I've noticed is that in my own multi-layered substance that makes up my failure, that substance is always full of success. I think to keep going, we need to agree on a common definition of failure and success. Can we go with failure meaning something that didn't work out the way you'd hoped, and success meaning something that did work out the way you'd hoped?
you know, I don't know. It's like within a system. So you're talking about you're failing within a system,
Yeah.
and yet a system around you that is somehow breeds failure in some ways. Like it's set up for like
Yeah.
failure. It's set up for scarcity. In our system, if you fail, it's just done. And and also you're seen by yourself and also by others as like not bringing any value to the system, and nobody trusts you after you fail too. This is the hardest part. Like if in consumerism, if I'm trying to sell my product and I'm failing, I lose consumer trust. But what if we had a system where like, you represented like failure as like, we should invest in this person who's failing.
It's like when stocks go down, you're supposed to buy them.
Very good. Why are you exploring failure really quickly? I just want to end with that. What's happening?
Because I'm a writer and what I do is write. And so this is what I woke up one morning and was like, I want to write about failure.
Great. It's a great
So
topic.
that's the only reason.
You
It's
def-
kind of like, it's like the life changing things
Mhm.
I wrote about doing the Ironman and then
Right.
getting
Right.
sent off to a magazine. I'm like, who knows? But I'm like, I just write. So that's who I am. So
Cool.
that's part of it. And I think I like the philosophical part. I like understanding things. For me, my probably one of my biggest joys is clarity on a situation.
Yeah.
Driving across the desert proved to be uneventful and enjoyable. Andy's Porsche was comfortable. We traveled with the Moody Blues, Leon Russell, The Doors, and T-Rex accompanying our conversations. Andy was a talker, and he had ideas, opinions, and questions that were fascinating, sometimes challenging, always engaging. I was thrilled to be crossing the desert with this man. The landscape surprised me. So much was growing. I pictured a desert like the Sahara, and instead came face to face with mesquite, cacti, sage, birds, cliffs, mesas, and vivid color. Our hours of driving finally ended, and we arrived in San Francisco, where I got to meet Andy's dad. Just like my expectation of what the desert would be like, my expectation of George proved to be totally wrong. He had a strong British accent and peppered everything he said with profanity. He had a pile of Playboy magazines in his living room, and he smoked cigars and drank every day. He was generous and took us all to dinner. The main attraction of his chosen restaurant was the drinks they served. My being underage didn't seem to matter to anybody. I did not dislike George, but his personality caught me off guard because he was much rougher than Andy and completely opposite my own dad. I had made arrangements to fly back to Chicago that night after dinner. My plane left around midnight and was the cheap overnight flight. I told Andy I would get to Catalina as soon as possible, but I had to work some stuff out with my parents first. He understood. Dad picked me up from the airport in the freshness and clarity of the early morning. My eyes felt scratchy from the all-night flight. We ate chocolate donuts and sipped coffee together on the drive home. Our truce was unspoken, and we both knew now how high the stakes really were. Back at the house, I hugged my mom and went to my beautiful room and fell sound asleep until early afternoon. I was welcomed back into the family with my parents' open arms, lots of hugs and attention from my siblings. I missed Andy terribly all the time. I missed his crazy ideas, his way of thinking and talking, his smile, his loyalty and love for his friends. I missed the way I felt when I was with him, the adventure every day turned into when he was there, his hugs and kisses. I missed the music he played, sharing passages from books we were reading, and his delicious cooking from recipes he found in the James Beard cookbook. I missed his great knowledge on any possible subject that spontaneously cropped up. I missed driving with him in his Porsche and learning more and more about who this man, who I had fallen deeply in love with, was. By comparison, things in my family home seemed dull. Although it felt very natural being home, after all, I had been in high school only a year before, it felt like I no longer belonged there. I no longer had a reason to live there. I had some friends around and saw them from time to time, but my life in Aspen felt more like home to me than my family's house. My parents asked me a lot of questions over the next few weeks. Do you still want to be an actress? Are you planning to travel in England this summer and audition for theater schools? What about Emerson College? Are you planning to attend? Their queries were kind and gentle and well-meaning, but they never asked me how it felt being there, or if I missed Andy, or how my winter in Aspen had changed me. I was not confident enough to tell them these things without being asked. It felt like a whole different world had opened to me. It was alive and vibrant, and I belonged there. I did want to go to England and audition for theater schools because acting was my dream, and I wasn't ready to set that down. I wasn't certain at all about moving to Boston and going to college, but that felt very far away. It was only the end of April, and college wouldn't start until September. Really, I just wanted to join Andy and Catalina as soon as possible, but the love I had for my family and my fear of losing them made me consider sticking to their plan. We planned my trip to England for July, and I was busy filling out applications and resumes to secure audition dates at the schools I was interested in. After high school graduation and before moving to Aspen, I had attended the American Conservatory Theater School in San Francisco, and my love for that profession had increased, as had my acting ability. My parents had gifted me a trip to England when I graduated from high school, and I hadn't gone yet, so this summer seemed like the perfect time to go. During my time at home, I spoke regularly on the phone with Andy. He called me from a payphone in Catalina. "When are you coming here?" he always asked. "I've told people about you, and they're all excited to meet you, and I'm so looking forward to you being here." Every day I miss you, and every day there is something that happens here that I want to show you or share with you. I want to be there too, I'd say. He would ask me, how are your doctor's appointments going? Have you made your travel plans for England yet? When can you get here? He never asked me what it felt like being with my family again, or how it was different for me being home now, and I was not brave enough to tell him these things. The divide between my family and the man I had fallen in love with had become uncrossable, and I had no idea how to get around it. I stayed with my family for as long as I could, until the phone calls from Andy began to come less frequently, and I knew I had to go to Catalina. It was almost June. Andy had told me there was a job working in the island snack bar waiting for me. I told my parents I was going, and they didn't like that at all. Regardless, I packed a bag and took a bus to the airport for the midnight flight to Los Angeles. It was not an easy task getting to LAX airport, from LAX airport to Long Beach, where the seaplanes flew to Catalina. It amazes me today that my young self was able to figure it out. I rode the buses around Los Angeles and got myself to the seaplane terminal, but still hadn't a clue how to navigate the waters that separated Andy from my family. It was fantastic to ride in the small seaplane, watching the island come into view. It was huge and had many hills, valleys, and coves. We flew low between the two sets of hills and through a valley opening. I saw some buildings and a dock by a harbor as we continued to the other side of the opening and glided down, gracefully skidding on the water until our plane came to a floating stop and motored toward a ramp where all of us passengers disembarked. I stood with my suitcase looking for Andy. The place we landed was called Cat Harbor, and there was nothing there but the seaplane landing ramp. I couldn't see any town or buildings. There was one vehicle, a van, and everyone, including the pilot, got on it. "Are you coming with us?" someone shouted to me. I shook my head no. I was too shy to ask where they were going when I had no idea where I was supposed to go. I hoped Andy would show up as I watched the van drive away in a cloud of dust, and I sat on my suitcase and read my book for a while. The sun got hotter. No one came as the time ticked on, until it seemed the only option was to start walking in the direction the van had gone. My suitcase was very heavy, but I plodded on, following the dirt track toward what looked like a bunch of big animals standing in the road further up. I gasped as I got closer. It was a herd of about 20 buffalo. I still couldn't see any people or buildings, and I was too scared to walk through a buffalo herd. I think I started to cry a little bit, and I took a much longer, more circuitous route off the road in order to avoid direct contact with these animals, who mostly ignored me. After what felt like forever walking and dragging my flowered suitcase, I came to a small village of houses and cabins and the dock we had flown over earlier. There were some people by the dock, so I walked over and asked if any of them knew Andy Heath. They pointed out the cabin where Andy lived, and I walked over and knocked on the door. "Hello," his voice said. "Come in." I opened the door. Looking shocked, he said, "You made it." He quickly enveloped me in a hug. "I met the van. Why weren't you on it?" How could I explain to him that I'd never been here, had no idea where the van was going, and was exhausted physically from flying all night, stretched thin emotionally from leaving my family under bad terms again? I had never been on an island before, and everything felt so new and strange. "I don't know," I said, "but I'm here now and I need to sleep." Excuse me. So that's what we did. Eventually, Andy's friend Gladys came by and woke us up. Andy, are you home?" My eyes adjusted to bright sunlight streaming in around the yellow curtain that was not quite drawn closed over the big picture window. "Come back in 15 minutes, Andy told her. I got up from the cozy, comfortably made bed and went over to my suitcase, which was set on the newly painted white plank floor. There were low, round wood tables, also painted white, on which sat exotic ceramic lamps that Andy showed me could be on brightly, or just the ceramic base could be lit with a dimmer setting. They were from Andy's travels when he was in the Army. We had a small bathroom, too, and before I went in there to wash up, I exclaimed over the wild but calm-inducing artistic interior walls that Andy had painted. There were 4 complementing colors of blue, painted in swirling shapes. The effect was magical and beautiful. It felt like being under the sea and up in the clouds all at once. This was my new home. Andy worked in the restaurant as a waiter, and I was to start in the snack bar in a day or two. But after only a day there, Andy took all the wind out of my sails. I don't love you anymore. I don't know what happened, but I waited and waited for you to arrive, and after a while, I stopped caring. I was stunned. I definitely wasn't expecting those words from him. I had been feeling happy to be there, and suddenly I had no reason to be there and nowhere else to go. I felt destroyed inside and had no one to talk to about it or to cry with, except Andy. I went for a long walk by myself. I followed the high dirt road that bordered the cliffs and meandered for miles along the island coast. I like being on this island, I thought. The wide blue ocean and the captivating mix of colors spread below me. Kelp beds undulated in the water, and bright orange fish competed with the sun's sparkles. The ocean belonged to all of us, and I was falling in love with it. I began to feel at one with all this beauty, and I felt a small fountain of joy at being connected to a place so beautiful and so much bigger than myself. A seed had been planted during my walk, and I recognized a place for me in this world, but I still had no idea what to do. It's just me on my own, I realized. I don't want to go away. I'm still in love with Andy. I understood then that loving someone is not dependent on being loved back. I had fallen in love at first sight with the ocean. As I walked down the steep hill back to the Isthmus village, 2 new friends were waving at me from a picnic table and calling out to me to join them. I made my way over, and they offered me some fresh slices of cantaloupe. I had never tasted anything so delicious. With the sweet cantaloupe juice still on my hands, I recognized that I was home. Right there, I was home. I did not need Andy or anybody else to love me to be home. The ocean and island were there. I was there. I'm staying, I told Andy. However you feel is fine, and whatever you do is fine, but I'm staying here. We agreed I could live in his cabin and we'd be friends. As awkward as that was, I felt better being close to him. My adult life began there. It was wonderful. I met new friends while working at the snack bar and began integrating into life at the Isthmus. Pat, an older British lady, managed all of us snack bar girls with humor as she taught me to make pancakes, fried eggs, and coffee, and she cheered us all on as we served locals their breakfasts. "Good show, duckies," she'd say. Every morning, I immediately put on my bathing suit and walked straight out of our cabin about 20 yards to the water's edge. I never hesitated, just walked right into the cool, salty sea for a dip. I ate breakfast at the snack bar. The pancakes were my favorite. My shifts were during the day, and Andy worked at night, so our schedules gave us the space we needed to grow individually and the freedom to allow our love for each other either to be reawakened or disappear altogether. I felt free of worry and relaxed into an easy, fun life with new friends and coworkers. After a few weeks, I felt Andy falling in love with me again. Even so, I continued to enjoy my independence. When I wasn't working, I was reading books by Alan Watts, Aldous Huxley, and Jiddu Krishnamurti. Andy was a runner, encouraged me to run with him. I had never run before, either for training or fun, and found it challenging. My breathing would squeak in wheezy inhales. I got tired quickly. I stuck with it until one day it became slightly less unpleasant, and I slowly but surely became hooked. Andy and I also rowed together in a 2-person dory, and unlike running, that was pure joy right from the start. The only other sport I had experience with that I found was that much fun was downhill skiing. Rowing was a glide through the ocean in sync with each other. We'd go far and fast with our effort. Weeks flew by, and soon I was making plans to get to Chicago again for my flight to England. I had an open ticket, so my return could be determined while I was abroad. This was important because if I was accepted into a theater school, I was planning to move. It was obvious that Andy's love for me had been reawakened as we discussed this next separation. "I'm British, and if you move there, I will move there too," he told me. I left the island with more confidence and joy. There was still that divide between my parents and my boyfriend, but I moved forward with renewed strength and clarity.